When someone says they want to be scared, the most common question is usually, why? And for me, the answer is, because I want to feel like I'm alive. Horror games. A genre of video game tailor-made to try and inspire fear and dread and tension in players. Games about loss and grief, games that focus on the darkest parts of the human mind and body, where monsters and worse will try and kill you and so much more. Why would anyone want to play a game like that? Because nothing on Earth can tell a story like a horror game can. When I think of good horror games, there are two games that stick out to me in particular. The first is the 2008 sci-fi horror game, Dead Space. In Dead Space, you're a hapless engineer trapped aboard a monster-infested ship in the far-flung future, and you must fight your way to freedom. In the second game, it's a little bit different. It's older. The game I'm referring to is the 2001 horror classic Silent Hill 2. Here, we explore the story of James Sunderland, a man who is out of touch with reality and is searching for his wife in the titular town of Silent Hill. What do both of these games have in common? Well, they both tackle the theme of depression and how to cope for it. And for me, these games provided an outlet for me to cope with my own depression. Dead Space was one of the first horror games I ever came across. I ended up with a copy of it during a very dark time in my life. I just left South Korea. Military families like mine, we move a lot. And this was just another move. But it was leaving friends behind and going somewhere I didn't have any friends. Dead Space was then, for me, a representation of this. I was alone in a new place that I was unfamiliar with, feelings of dread and tension as I tried to navigate unfamiliar paths and deal with the challenges all alone. The protagonist, Isaac, never speaks. He was silent, just like I was. Together we wordlessly trode the blood-stained hallways of the Ishimura, the deep space mining vessel filled with monsters and darkness. I felt like I was walking through my own mind, dark and alien and alone. Each new creature that rose up to attack Isaac was like a dark thought rising in my own mind. Each time Isaac killed one of these monsters, it was like banishing a bad thought from my head. But that didn't last. Eventually, I completed Dead Space, and I left it. I left the rusted and stained hallways. I left Isaac alone in that ship, with the blood and the ghosts. Time passed, and I no longer had something to banish the thoughts like I used to. Going back and replaying Dead Space helped a little. It was good to see Isaac's familiar armor-clad form, hear the familiar echoes of the empty halls and his heavy footfalls as he navigated its corridors once again. But I was still alone. I didn't have friends, no one to talk to, no one to share things I loved. Horror games were not something I could just talk about. They're not good conversation. How do you talk about monsters and evil and the dark with anyone? It's hard to do that. Eventually, time kept going. Years passed. I got worse. I had a hole in my chest, like a great void that yawed into the abyss. Everything I did was just a desperate attempt to fill that void. I overate. I didn't sleep. I slept too much. I cut off any connection with anybody. Everything was just trying to fill that void and to stop people from finding out about it. Eventually, during this time, I found Silent Hill 2, and it changed something. In that game, I found James, a man with just as much darkness and depression and self-loathing as me. More than me, actually. In James, I found somebody I could understand. I knew what he was going through. He spoke, he had feelings, he had a goal. But it never seemed like James cared about that. He was just as detached as I was, simply going through the motions because he didn't have anything else to do. He had nothing else to live for except for this vague promise that was so nebulous it could have really meant anything. I understood that. I understood that too well. And so I played that game. I played it day after day after day. I played it once, and then twice, and then several times. Every time I played it, I could understand a bit more. That pain of being alone didn't seem so bad when I was with James in Silent Hill. The mist, the fog covering everything, hiding the monsters in the dark. Eventually it was comforting, or almost comforting. And every time I got scared, I could finally feel something. That rush of adrenaline made me feel alive. I wasn't numb anymore. With that, I launched myself into horror games, horror media, anything to give me that spark of fear just so I could feel again, just so I wouldn't be numb. Years after that, it was still my only source of enjoyment. But eventually, I managed to get real help. Help that didn't require me to be afraid. Yet, even now, after all this time has passed, all the things that I've managed to do, all the improvements I've made, and all the things I've fixed, I know that none of that would have been possible without that little bit of dark. That craving for fear, for repulsion, for horror. That's what kept me going for a while. It's what kept me coming back and getting up each day. Just a little more of that taste. So when someone asks why I want to be afraid, I don't tell them that it makes me feel alive. Now I tell them that I want to be afraid because fear is what kept me alive.